This Monday, a crowd of trans rights activists stormed the Oklahoma Capitol Hill building. They did so in opposition to particular pieces of legislation that Governor Kevin Stitt pushes forward, such as Senate Bill 129 and House Bill 101. Now, speaking of laws and justice, why not visit our website, lotuseaters.com. For only £5 a month, you can have access to our premium content, such as the latest installment of the Symposium series, Justice in Plato's Republic, where Carl and myself are talking about how basically Plato predicted the woke character and how he said that in a nutshell that the lack of discipline in one's thinking is behind most of the dangerous social trends in all societies, all places, and at all time. Now, speaking of lack of discipline in one's thinking, I watched a very distressing video on Twitter, and I want to share it with you. Let's watch.
I gave up, and it was too difficult, and I cowered it out. And I just don't even really know what to say, you know, I wish that this was me doing a video talking about how it used to be a struggle, but it isn't. It's still a struggle, and I struggle with it every day. You know, I have dreams, and in my dreams, I am pregnant, or, you know, I have my children, and everything feels so complete, and then I wake up, and it's not true, and it's just really hard. Being a trans woman is very difficult for many reasons.
Now, speaking of men being men in Japan and women being women, I think that this is really pernicious, and it has to stop in a way, because people are we're losing our minds, and there are people who want to capitalize upon confusion. And I think this person seems to me to be confused, to put it in a polite manner. And there are people who are trying to basically capitalize upon confusion. So men can't get pregnant. It used to be that we were dreaming of flying. Now we have men dreaming of giving birth to children and crying if they cannot. Now I found that distressing. So can I ask you what you think about it?
I was watching this video recently. I don't know if you remember, what was it, Norma something? There's this lady who was a feminist, lesbian. She decided in 2006 that she would go and live with men, dressed as men, and pretend to be a man, to see how men really lived and to find out if they had it better. And the whole thing is obviously hilarious, because she finds out, oh no, it's way worse. I actually prefer being a woman, screw that. And she also finds out a whole bunch of other differences between the sexes, which are funny and interesting, but for another time. But the main one at the end of it, she mentions that she, after playing this role and pretending to be a man for ages, and this is before transgenderism was a thing in the consciousness, is that she ended up becoming really mentally ill and checked herself into a hospital with severe depression, and she also started trying to cut herself. It was where she also found out that cutting herself is very feminine. Men don't do that. So her summation in the video, when she's being interviewed by CBS, is that identity is really fragile, shouldn't be messed with, and if you do it, you're going to end up with as bad a mental state as a physical state.
Yeah.
And that's in 2006.
So, moving forward, many senators and lawmakers, they think that, especially from the Republican side, they think that laws banning transgender gender-confirming surgery should be put forward. Now, let's focus on a new article from Daily Mail that was published yesterday by Jen Smith, the chief reporter for dailymail.com. Now, the title is Trans Lives Matter Protesters Occupy Oklahoma Capitol Building to Fight GOP Bills That Bans Gender-Confirming Surgery for Under 21. Okay, I read from the text. Trans Lives Matter protesters descended on Oklahoma's state capitol building yesterday, occupying the interior rotunda to protest against new bills that would ban gender-affirming surgery for young people. The protesters from Oklahomans for Equality and Freedom Oklahoma started their demonstration outside the building, then moved indoors. Organizers told DailyMail.com that all protesters entered the building peacefully, going through the necessary security checks before staging their demonstration inside. Their protest was against a collection of proposed new legislation that is being championed by Republican Governor Kevin Stitt. Some of the bills propose a ban on state funds being used for gender reassignment care or surgery for anyone under the age of 18. Now imagine being a taxpayer and actually part of your taxes goes to state-funded gender reassignment surgery.
What do you mean imagine?
Yeah.
I live there.
No. Yeah, no. But I want to say that, I mean, this is definitely not something that people consent to.
No.
Or that, yeah. Especially when we talk about taxation and what taxation is supposed to be doing. Now, the most restrictive, Senate Bill 129, seeks to ban such treatment for anyone under the age of 26 by punishing doctors who provide those services. The physicians would face criminal prosecution and would lose their license. The Oklahoma State Legislature is yet to vote on the laws. The organizers of yesterday's event called the legislation genocide, claiming restricting youth's access to the care will drive them to suicide. Some medical professionals say it will drive doctors out of the state. In his State of the State address last night, Governor Stitt doubled down on his plans and called on the state legislature to pass the bills. As he said, "We must protect our most vulnerable, our children. After all, minors can't vote, can't purchase alcohol, can't purchase cigarettes. We shouldn't allow a minor to get a permanent gender-altering surgery in Oklahoma. That's why I'm calling on the legislature to send me a bill that bans all gender transition surgeries and hormone therapies on minors in the state." Seems to me to be legislation towards the right direction. As governor, I will never shy away from calling out right from wrong. I will not be intimidated by partisan interest groups or make decisions based on groupthink. I will continue my responsibility to lead, not follow. I ran for this office 5 years ago because I was tired of seeing other states succeed while ours got left behind. The protesters say youngsters should be able to access such medical care, regardless of their age. It is unclear how many state lawmakers were at the Capitol yesterday when the protesters made their way inside. And Benjamin Patterson, a trans man who was one of the organizers, told student news outlet OU Nightly he wanted to bring the community together. He called the state laws genocide, claiming it would lead to more trans youths taking their own lives. Now, the question is...
It's not genocide.
It's not, but the
But
question...
even if every transgender person commits suicide tomorrow, it's not genocide.
But the question is... what kind of community is supposed to be brought together? Because you clearly don't bring a community together by saying that those who disagree with you do so because they are ill-intended monsters who want to commit genocide against you. That's not a way to bring a community together, except if they are talking about another kind of community. Zephyr Cove, another protester, said kids should be able to access hormone replacement therapy as soon as they have a sense of self. As he says, you know that as soon as you have a sense of self. These kids shouldn't be forced to have to deny that just because the people around them won't listen to them. Now, again, this is really weird because when we have a notion of self, we are having a notion of self-conception. And it's really it's really a young age for children, to 4, 5, 6, whenever we start being conscious of ourselves, is that it's really weird that we have people like that who say if you tell no to a child who says that is a different gender, you are basically leading it to commit down a road that it will eventually commit suicide. This is a kind of progressive parenting that isn't very successful. Now, last year, Governor Stitt signed a bill into effect that bans transgender females from competing in girls' sports. The law also bans transgender females from using girls' lockers rooms and bathrooms. Instead, school students must use the restroom of the gender they were born. The protesters at yesterday's rally included students from the local university. Senate Bill 129, also called the Millstone Act, seeks to ban gender reassignment surgery for anyone under the age of 26. It was put forward by Republican Senator David Bullard earlier this year. We want to make sure that if we're going to do a procedure like this that is irreversible, then we want to make sure an individual is at their full maturity when it comes to cognitive development, he said at the time. The bill leans on widely cited research that claims the brain continues developing until a person is 25. The less restrictive Bill 101, put forward by State Representative Jim Olson, would stop doctors from giving a referral for puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and gender reassignment surgeries for people under the age of 21. Senate Bill 252 would prohibit anyone under the age of 18 from receiving gender reassignment surgery, and Senate Bill 250 would prohibit medical officials and entities from receiving reimbursement through Medicaid if they offer gender transition services. Oklahoma is proposing some of the strictest transgender healthcare legislation in the country. It seems to me that this is some good news after some time.
Yeah, if it passes.
Yeah. So, let's move forward and see. I want to say I found how equivalent events have been portrayed by those who disagree. And some weeks ago, there were similar events in Utah. And there was a trans rights, an LGBTQ activist called Laverne Cox that was hosted on MSNBC. There was a guest on MSNBC. And let us watch the video.
While 2022 was a record-setting year for regressive anti-trans legislation being passed or introduced across 36 states, 2023 is already shaping up to be even worse as policy-barren Republicans amp up their attacks on the LGBTQ community. So far this year, according to the ACLU, more than 100 bills targeting LGBTQ rights have been filed across 22 states. And while Republican hysterics over drag shows, critical race theory, and book bans are equal parts absurd and horrifying, the latest line of attack on trans adults' right to gender-affirming healthcare could have deadly consequences for those who would be impacted if the bills become law. Joining me now, Emmy-nominated actress, Emmy-winning producer, and LGBTQ activist and friend of the show, Laverne Cox. Laverne, thank you very much for coming back to the Sunday show. As a trans person, what do you make of all this? How do you navigate this constant barrage of attacks on your humanity?
So I want to say that this reporter, he sets the discussion in a way that is really sophistical. So he says, if these pieces of legislation pass, they could have deadly consequences for those who identify as trans. Now, this is one-sided fear-mongering rhetoric because there is also a question of rising suicide rates to those who do transition. So either way, this is something that does happen in that community. And there is a question as to what are the best ways to solve it. That is why brainstorming is required. When the opposite view is demonized, there is no brainstorming. And members of that community keep having high suicide rates. And there's another question that this reporter poses, is that how do you interpret the constant barrage of attacks on your humanity? How does this question sound?
It's not a question. It's just say the line.
Yes.
That's all this is.
Yes.
Which is like, hey, I have guests you've never heard of. Now set a question, which is just say the line I want you to. All right, thank you very much, person no one's ever heard of. Now get off the show. It's just pure propaganda outlet.
Yes, exactly. And the point is that if you phrase this question, how do you interpret the constant barrage of attacks on your humanity? This is to misrepresent the issue because it's not an an attack. When people are critical of gender ideology, it is not an attack on the humanity of some people. It is an attack on an interpretation of a feeling that leads people to identify as trans. Those are two different things. Okay, and let us watch the next part of this video.
We are being used as a distraction because politicians have not figured out a way to deal with so many pertinent issues in this culture. We have to understand that we're being used as a distraction. We have to understand that the conversations that are being had about us are dehumanizing, and we have to reclaim our humanity. Whenever we're talking about gender affirming care for trans people, we're dehumanizing them. Whenever we are not highlighting the beautiful humanity, the lived experiences of trans people, we are dehumanizing them. And when we dehumanize people, we can take away their rights and people won't even notice.
Okay, I think she made the slip of the tongue where she said, whenever we are talking about gender affirming care for trans people, we are dehumanizing them. This is literal quote of what she said. Don't know if it's a slip of the tongue, but I'll try to say that I'll proceed on the assumption that it is not. So what she says here, she says, we have to understand that the conversation that are being had about us are dehumanizing, and we have to reclaim our humanity. Whenever we are talking about gender affirming care for trans people, we are dehumanizing them. And she says, whenever we are not highlighting the beautiful humanity, the lived experiences of trans people, we are dehumanizing them. Whatever. And when we dehumanize people, we can take away their rights and people won't even notice. Now, there's a really interesting question about who is demonized here. Because it seems to me that everyday people who disagree with gender ideology are demonized.
None of these words mean anything. It's like the whole, I've been attacked. I'm under threat. All this weasel words that get used in politics like that. Like, that bloke there clearly just needs to take off the fishnets from his hands. I just get on with life. And instead, sitting there being like, people are trying to kill me. No one's trying to kill you. Nobody gives a crap about you. That's the fact about it. Like, no one gives a crap about anyone, really, when it comes down to it. A random person across the world I've never heard of is thinking they're a man or a woman. And no, they're trying to kill me, brother. Like, no one's trying to kill you.
And there's an important thing, that the last quote is actually true, because she says, and when we dehumanize people, we can take away their rights and people won't even notice. Now, the thing is, that's true, but the point here is that it is simple people who are demonized when you portray a dismissal of gender ideology as being an attack on humanity. So what I want to say is that I think that the woke movement is a very multifaceted movement, and it has sinister elements inside it, and it's not incidental that one of the aspects of the woke movement attacks Western civilization, because one of the interesting insights and the very valuable insights of Western civilizations is that if we are to curb arbitrary authority, we have to be governed by general laws. If we do not live into that, if we're not governed by general laws, we are governed by the whims of our masters. And the thing is that when we have attacks on Western civilization day in and day out, it is this idea of the law that is also targeted. And make no mistake, these people intend to be the masters, and they want to be masters that do not govern in terms of general principles that apply to all. They want to govern according to their whim. And worse, some of them think that their whim constitutes law. Now, I want to say that the thing is that policies have a general nature. We are legislating in terms of laws that are to hold for all people, and that all people by default are subject to them. There may be mitigating circumstances, such as the ones that are pleaded occasionally in courts of law, but the default position is that the law applies to everyone. So the thing is that when we are going to talk about policies, we cannot just think of particular individuals. When we're when we're deliberating about a policy of this sort, we have to take into account many people, and we have to take scientific data into account about that. Talk about what people do when after they seek such surgeries. So I want to say that the woke ideologues commit to really dangerous leaps, and they are doing this because they are, in a sense, really self-centered. Now, the leap number one is they think that just because they feel right now that they won't regret having a sex change operation, that they will never regret it. This is not true. Okay, there are detransitioners, and their voices have to matter if you care about this and you want to legislate in order to solve a particular problem. And second is that based on their belief that they will never regret undergoing this operation, they project this to everyone else. And they want to say that everyone who identifies as trans will always feel better and will never regret this operation. And again, this is not true. So I want to say that it is, if there are people who harm members of that community more, it is gender ideologues. Because when you're spreading this rhetoric of victimhood and the idea that people who disagree with you are demonizing you and they are attacking your humanity, you are basically cutting their ties with the rest of the community. You're trying to basically become a middle man and try to tell them that society is up against you. There is no way in which you can be integrated in society. So, just think this as being an attack on your humanity. And when we have this idea of an attack on humanity, when we interpret disagreement as an attack on our humanity, the notion of violent self-defense becomes more prominent. And as we said, there are also people who disagree with gender ideology that are demonized. And this is not something that is good.
If you appreciated that segment from the podcast The Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the content that's on the site, such as the Contemplation series, this one on libertarianism. If you'd like to find out what else Lotus is putting out, you can follow on Getter at lotuseaters_com on Getter. Thank you and goodbye.